It's a common argument in theistic apologetics to assert that because something like creation took place or that morality exists, there must be a supernatural creator or supernatural lawgiver, which, by the way, always happens to be the same entity. And here's what every single apologist fails to see. The creator or lawgiver, if they do exist, do not have to be the same being. Hey everyone, welcome to Noah's Snark. Today I'm going to play a little game of What If. What if the Cosmos administrative staff is not a single CEO, but rather a whole suite of departments? Gods for different jobs, gods with overlapping resumes, gods who share an office calendar and occasionally fight over who gets to handle Thursdays. A fight Thor always wins, by the way. In short, there is no good reason to suppose monotheism over polytheism. And that's me getting right to the point. There is no reason to suppose a single God created the entire universe and oversees every aspect of that creation. There could be a different God for creation, of morality, of each law of physics, of love, etc. To suppose one God is responsible for all these different things rests entirely upon a presupposition about who or what the monotheistic God is, a point that can't be brought up enough. That said, why can't there be 2, 3, or infinitely many gods who share all the core attributes typically assigned to the Abrahamic God, meaning omnipotence, omniscience, and omnibenevolence, qualities that make a god, but who specialize in different aspects of reality, yet are identical in all key, or rather, definitional respects. First, a little bit of background. Many theists argue from features of our world to the existence of a divine being. Morality means there's a moral lawgiver. Fine-tuning means there's a cosmic designer. Existence means there is a necessary being. This is a familiar sequence. There is X needs an explanation, therefore God. Classic God of the Gap stuff. The jump people often make is silently smuggling in the assumption that the explanation must be a single, unified being with all the attributes we normally read into quote-unquote God. But that assumption is neither necessary nor particularly well justified. Imagine you walk into a cathedral-sized IKEA and see a beautifully complex bookshelf. A monotheist might say, clearly one master carpenter conceived this artifact and nailed it all together. But a polytheist might say, no, teams of specialists, designing, gluing, varnishing, collaborated to create this artifact. Both explanations could fit the observable outcome. Why do people default to a single artisan for the cosmic question, something like the universe? Well, because the human brain, which loves saving energy and likes shortcuts, prefers simplicity and narrative charm. At least that's one explanation. Another would be cultural indoctrination. Let's parse the options. Option A, one God, the classic, one entity who's behind everything. Pros, elegant, philosophically tidy, satisfies our narrative need for a protagonist. Cons, raises some tough questions about internal consistency. Why is there so much suffering if the being is omnibenevolent and omnipotent? And it's the heavier metaphysical commitment, one being to explain everything. Option B, multiple gods, different beings, different responsibilities, perhaps overlapping powers. Pros, can explain modular features of reality, allows for specialization, and resolves certain dilemmas by spreading responsibilities. Let's say, for example, there really is a god of suffering who shares the classical god's attributes, and that's why the classical god hasn't stopped the god of suffering, because the god of suffering is also triune in their characteristics. There's some explanatory power there, a better theodicy than what apologists have come up with so far, if you ask me. Cons, seems the messier option, and raises questions about how those gods coordinate and why some people intuitively attribute everything to one being. My guess would be that it's not actually intuition, rather it's either parental or societal indoctrination that is characterized as intuition. If being outside space-time allows an expansive realm where multiplicity is possible without spatial constraints, why can't there be many such beings? That said, it doesn't seem to me like the con of being the messier explanation is actually messier. Now let me address some obvious objections. Objection 1. But that's just multiplying entities needlessly. Occam's razor prefers the simpler explanation, one god over many. Well, that's not really Occam's razor. It doesn't simply mean the simpler explanation is the better explanation. It endorses simplicity, explanatory efficiency. If positing multiple gods explains features of reality better or resolves contradictions, say assigning blame for suffering to one god even though there's a god of justice, then the plural hypothesis may actually be the simpler one in explanatory terms. Also, simplicity is not automatic truth. Nature itself can be messy. Would you rather a neat theory that's false or a complicated theory that's true? Some of you don't answer that. Objection 2. Multiple gods would conflict. How would they coordinate? Coordination, the great staff meeting of the cosmos. Plenty of coordinated systems exist without a single manager. Ecosystems, markets, laws of physics themselves. If these gods are omniscient and outside of time, they might already share perfect knowledge and thus never disagree. If they share omniscience, they'd know each other's plans and could coordinate perfectly. That removes the sitcom-level bickering you might imagine. Objection 3. If gods share all omni-attributes, aren't they really just the same god? This is a tricky semantic move. If two beings have identical intrinsic properties and are numerically distinct, they are still two beings. Consider identical twins, same DNA, different individuals. Or imagine two parallel universes with identical Earths. Are they the same Earth? No. Numerical distinction matters. Philosophers talk about numerical identity versus qualitative identity. Two gods could be qualitatively identical, having the same properties, but numerically distinct, different existences. That makes the plurality of my hypothesis metaphysically coherent. Here is a practical analogy. Think of the company that builds your smartphone. There isn't a single person who designed, manufactured, wrote the software, tested the battery, negotiated supplier contracts, and created the marketing campaign. There are teams, divisions, and subcontractors. Yet when your phone works, you often credit the company as a single agent. We do the same with nature. It's tempting to cite one ultimate agent, but complexity often suggests systems of agents, as I brought up in my podcast, utterly dismantling the design argument, which I'll link either in the description or at the end of this video on YouTube. Now, let's consider the moral angle too. If moral values exist, one explanation is a moral lawgiver. But could there be many moral lawgivers, each responsible for a different moral domain? Maybe one grounds the concept of justice, another grounds the concept of care, and another grounds the concept of honesty. If the realm where God resides is not spatially constrained, nothing in principle prevents an infinite number of such gods. The existence of infinity in mathematics, it's not metaphysically impossible merely because it's strange. If each god is outside time and space and is a possible maximal being, an unbound set of gods might exist. Yes, that sounds extravagant, but metaphysics often asks us to entertain the extravagant. I'll wrap this up with something to imagine. Picture the divine council in a non-spatial room, which sounds weird, such as God alludes to in Genesis. There is the creator of time, the keeper of morality, the architect of physical constants, the muse of beauty, etc. They sit around sipping something non-dimensional and coordinate over the cosmic docket. They are all omniscient, omnipotent, and omnibenevolent, at least insofar as those properties apply, and they are many, not one. Is that less plausible than a single monarch god? Maybe. Is it logically incoherent? No, not at all. The only objection a theist might have here is to say there is no God but God out of some arbitrary definition that posits God as the only God. Philosophy often tells us to question our assumptions. The assumption that the explanation for everything must be a single being is a convenience, not a necessity. There is no good reason to assume monotheism over polytheism if one is going to be theistic. If one is going to argue from morality, from existence, or design to a supernatural explanation, the space of possible explanations is larger than a single God. Multiple gods, specialized, identical, or infinite in number, is an idea that is coherent in its nature and worth considering if we're serious about following where the logic leads. Thanks for listening to Noah's Snark. I'm Atheist Josephina, aka AJV. If you like this kind of content, kindly like and subscribe. We'll see you next time.